The story of how one wrong email changed everything. Hey. Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you found this video. Before we get into this absolutely wild story, drop in the comments where you are watching from right now. Like literally what city, what country. I want to know. And how are you doing today? For real though, how are you? Now listen, if you are not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button right now. I post stories like this every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, okay? Okay, now let's get into it. Superior Court, State of California. Department 47. Case number SC. 2019-4471. Plaintiff. Meridian Global Holdings, LLC. Defendant me. Sarah Okonkwo. Age 29. Former executive assistant. I remember standing outside that courtroom in a blazer I borrowed from my cousin. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled coffee on my sleeve before I even got through security. My lawyer, a small, quiet woman named Patricia Grimes, who I could only afford because she took my case pro bono, squeezed my arm and said, "Just tell the truth. That's all." Inside, the courtroom felt like a church that hated you, with paneling everywhere, fluorescent lights humming above. On the other side of the room sat a team of 4 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than my rent. Behind them, not looking at me, sat Richard Halverson, billionaire, tech founder, man whose face had been on the cover of Forbes 3 times. He was wearing a navy blue suit and reading something on his phone like this was all just a minor inconvenience to him. The judge entered. Everyone stood. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia were presiding. The lead lawyer for Halverson's company stood up immediately. His name was Gerald Marsh. He was tall, silver-haired, and spoke like every word he said was already law. "Your Honor," he said, "my client is seeking damages of $12 million against Ms. Okonkwo for breach of confidentiality, theft of proprietary information, and deliberate sabotage of Meridian Global Holdings. $12 million. I was sitting there with a borrowed blazer and a coffee stain on my sleeve. I had maybe $400 in my checking account. $12 million. My lawyer stood up calmly. "Your Honor, my client did none of those things. What she did was receive an email, one email, that was sent to her by mistake. And when she saw what was in it, she did what any decent person would do. She reported it." The judge looked at me over her glasses. I looked back at her and tried not to cry. Now let me take you back. Because for you to understand what happened in that courtroom, you need to understand how I got there. And it starts about 8 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other Tuesday morning of my life. I was 28 years old. I had a business degree from a mid-level state university. I had student loans. I had a studio apartment with a radiator that made sounds like it was dying every night. And I had a job, a really good job, or so I thought, as an executive assistant at a tech firm called Meridian Global Holdings. Meridian was one of those companies that did a little bit of everything. Software, logistics, some real estate. Richard Halverson had started it in his garage 20 years ago, the classic story, and built it into something worth about $4 billion. He had a foundation. He gave speeches at universities. His PR team made sure there was always a photo of him somewhere handing a check to a children's hospital. My job was to manage the schedule of one of his senior vice presidents, a woman named Dana Cole. Travel bookings, meeting prep, expense reports. I was good at it. I kept my head down. I was saving up to maybe go back to school. Then one morning I opened my laptop, pulled up my email, and saw something that made my stomach drop. Subscribe if you haven't already. This story gets so much crazier from here, and I don't want you to miss a single part. The email came in at 6:47 a.m. It was from an address I didn't recognize. An internal company address, but not one I'd ever seen. The subject line said, FWD, Q3 disposal, final figures confirmed. I almost deleted it. I thought it was misdirected accounting stuff, but something made me open it. I don't know why. Maybe just curiosity. Maybe just because it was early and my coffee hadn't kicked in yet. What I read inside that email made me sit up very straight. It was a forwarded chain of messages between Richard Halverson and a man named Douglas Fine, who I later learned was the CFO of a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The chain was detailed, specific. It talked about moving funds, large funds, from a worker compensation pool. A pool that was supposed to pay out claims to injured employees. There were numbers, dates, signed approvals, and at the bottom of the most recent message, sent at 11:53 p.m. the night before from Halverson's personal email, were these exact words. Make sure nothing traces back to the main entity. The claimants won't push back. They never do. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, went to the bathroom, and stood over the sink for a full minute. These were real people. Workers who had been injured on job sites connected to Meridian's logistics division. People who had filed legitimate claims. People who were waiting on money they were owed. Money meant to help them pay medical bills and feed their families. And someone at the top had decided to just take it. I went back to my desk. I didn't say anything to anyone that day. I just did my work. Booked a flight to Denver for Dana. Confirmed a lunch reservation. Answered 17 emails. But I had taken a screenshot before I closed that email. I don't know exactly why I did it in the moment. Something just told me to. That screenshot would change my entire life. I didn't go to the press. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call a reporter. What I did, what I thought was the safe, responsible, correct thing to do, was go to HR. Big mistake. I sent a carefully worded email to the head of human resources, a man named Todd Brell, explaining that I had received a misdirected email that appeared to contain information about financial misconduct and that I wanted to report it through the proper internal channels. Todd Brell responded within 20 minutes. He said he'd like to meet with me first thing the next morning. I showed up. He was sitting with another man I had never seen before. No introduction. Just, have a seat, Sarah. They asked me if I still had the email. I said yes. They asked me to forward it to them directly and delete it from my account. They said this was standard procedure for misdirected confidential communications. I did it, and 3 days later, I was called into a meeting and told my position had been eliminated due to restructuring. 2 weeks after that, I received a legal notice. Meridian Global Holdings was suing me for $12 million. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, now is really the time. We're just getting started. I won't lie to you. The 6 months between getting that legal notice and walking into that courtroom were the hardest of my life. I called my mom the night I got the letter. She cried. I told her not to worry. Then I hung up and I cried too, sitting on the floor of my studio apartment next to the dying radiator. I had no money for a lawyer. I had no savings to fall back on because I had just drained them dealing with a car repair and a medical bill from earlier that year. I had a lawsuit from a billion-dollar company and a screenshot on my phone that I had no idea if I could even use. I reached out to 12 law firms in the first 2 weeks. Most of them didn't respond. 3 of them said they couldn't take the case. One of them told me, very politely, that going up against Halverson's legal team would be extremely difficult, and I should consider whether settlement was an option. Settlement. They wanted me to settle. Sign a paper saying I did something wrong, pay whatever amount they decided was appropriate, and keep quiet forever. I thought about it. I really did. But I kept thinking about that line in the email. The claimants won't push back. They never do. I didn't want to be someone who didn't push back. Patricia Grimes found me through a nonprofit legal aid organization. She read my case summary over the weekend and called me on a Monday morning. You didn't do anything wrong, she said as a greeting. Are you willing to fight? I said yes. Patricia was sharp. The first thing she did was file a motion arguing that the lawsuit itself was retaliatory, designed to silence a potential whistleblower. She also contacted a journalist at a regional business publication, not to leak anything, but just to make sure someone in the press knew this case existed. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached out to some of the injured workers, the ones whose claims had been delayed or denied. She asked if any of them had documentation. 3 of them did. One man, I'll call him Marcus, had been waiting 2 years on a back injury claim after an accident at a Meridian-connected warehouse. He had every letter, every denial, every phone call logged. He had kept everything because he said nobody ever believed him and he wanted proof. Patricia put together a picture. And that picture was not flattering for Richard Halverson. The day before the trial was set to begin, Halverson's team requested a private mediation session. Patricia looked at me across the table in her small, cluttered office and said, "They're scared." I asked her what we should do. She smiled. "We make them more scared. In mediation, They offered me $200,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. I said no. They offered $350,000. I said no. Patricia laid out everything we had. The screenshot, Marcus's documentation, the pattern of denials, the timeline between my HR report and my firing. She put it all on the table and let them look at it. The room was very quiet for a long time. Then Gerald Marsh, the tall silver-haired lawyer, leaned over and whispered something to the person next to him. They asked for a break. Quick pause. Have you subscribed yet? This is the part where everything changes. Don't miss the ending. They settled. Not with me. With everyone. What happened over the next 4 months was bigger than anything I had imagined when I was standing over that bathroom sink trying to calm myself down. The State Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation into Meridian Global Holdings based partly on documents that came out during my case proceedings. 3 other former employees came forward with similar concerns once the story started to get some coverage. A financial forensics team went through years of records. In the end, Meridian paid out over $40 million in restitution to injured workers. Todd Brell, the HR director, resigned. Douglas Fine, the CFO of the Shell company, faced criminal charges. Richard Halverson settled with regulators for an undisclosed amount, stepped down as CEO, and quietly disappeared from the public eye. He never faced criminal charges himself. His lawyers made sure of that. That part still bothers me. As for me, the lawsuit against me was dropped completely. Patricia negotiated a separate wrongful termination settlement that I'm not allowed to share the exact number of. But it was enough. Enough to pay off my student loans. Enough to move into a real apartment. Enough to breathe. Marcus, the man with the back injury, received a full payout of his original claim plus interest. He called me when it came through. He didn't say much. He just said, "Thank you." And then he got quiet on the phone for a second. That phone call meant more to me than anything else that happened. I think about that Tuesday morning a lot. The misdirected email. The screenshot I almost didn't take. The HR meeting I thought was going to help me. Here's the honest truth. I was terrified for most of this experience. I second-guessed myself constantly. There were nights I wished I had just deleted the email and never thought about it again. There were moments I genuinely believed I was going to lose everything over something I didn't even do. But I also think about that line. They never do. Someone powerful decided that regular people, hurt people, struggling people, would not fight back, would not make noise, would not cause trouble. And they built a whole financial scheme on that assumption. I just happened to get an email by accident one Tuesday morning. And I happened to keep the screenshot. The world didn't suddenly become fair after all of this. Halverson still has his money. He still has his houses. Power like that doesn't just disappear. But $40 million went back to the people it belonged to. A few people who thought they were untouchable found out they weren't completely untouchable. And I got to keep my integrity, which, when they were threatening me with $12 million, felt like it cost too much. Now it feels like it was the only thing worth keeping. That's my story. All of it. If this video meant something to you, please subscribe. I share stories like this every week. Real experiences, real consequences, real people. Hit that bell so you don't miss any of them. Drop in the comments. What would you have done if you opened that email? Would you have reported it? Would you have deleted it? I genuinely want to know. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just refuse to be quiet. See you next week.